Why does nobody seem to care about the fact that China literally has concentration camps in which they put undesirable minorities and subject them to constant torture and propaganda? There were many lessons the world learned from World War II and the Nazis. One of them was, if you want to commit genocide, you have to stick to people within your own borders. Despite the common saying of never again, there have been multiple incidences of genocide around the world since World War II, and the world has basically sat by and done nothing. China is actually getting more attention than most. When things like this happen in Africa, that's when it gets ignored. But the reality is, the world just isn't going to stop a country from killing its own people. And it really doesn't matter if it's a poor country or an economically powerful country. What can they do? Sanctions won't stop China, just like it hasn't stopped North Korea, Myanmar, Syria, Iran, etc. All they can do is make noise through diplomatic channels, which some are, via the UN. I mean, Saddam Hussein was a terrible person who did terrible things. How did removing him from power go on a human rights and well-being level? Same with most other places experiencing the Arab Spring. Arguably, the 20 years of war since Hussein was deposed makes his tenure as leader almost preferable, if not for the Western world, but those who have suffered the 20 years of almost constant warfare since. I get the feeling people don't understand how World War II went down. No one went to war with Germany to save the Jews, at all. As far as I'm aware, Germany was trying to take over the world, like Saturday morning cartoon villain style. They were invading and declaring war left and right with the end goal of total global domination. Because Hitler was stupid and insane and on drugs. No one gave a crap until Germany started lashing out and territory was at risk. If Germany had kept to themselves, I'm sure the world would have let them quietly genocide an entire chunk of their population because hey, that ain't our business and they're beneficial to us as they are. No one wanted to start another world war. No one wanted to spend that kind of money and lose so many lives again, and they sure as crap weren't about to do it for noble, ideological reasons. But Germany invaded Poland and the world realized that wow, Adolf Hitler is unhinged. He is a global threat. We can't let him accrue allies and enact his plan of world domination. It makes me roll my eyes when people are like, North Korea, why aren't we doing anything about them? It's like Nazi Germany, as if they really think the world went to war over protecting German Jews. They try to apply the same argument to China because oh my god, concentration camps, Hitler did those, and remember what we did to Hitler? Why aren't we stopping them? We're the good guy world police America, fricky, as if America didn't sit out most of World War II and only reluctantly decided to help out because Japan got cocky and attacked us. As if America hasn't installed fascist dictators, members of the same ideology we claimed we were nobly fighting against in World War II, in countries where that kind of rule would benefit us directly. As if America actually has some kind of ideological objection to fascism or concentration camps or human rights abuses. As if going to war with China wouldn't risk the destruction of not only the global economy, but possibly the destruction of the entire world. As if America would go to war with a country that can 1. Actually fight back and 2. Holds their purse strings over a tiny ethnic minority in a country across the globe. Okay, it's such a juvenile, innocent, naive worldview. Yet, in an ideal world, we would be able to put a stop to these horrific human rights abuses. But we're all so deep in the crap in so many different ways that we just have to let it go on. There are no heroes. No one gives a crap. It should be fixed by the people there. Take Iran, for example. America is actively trying to topple the Iranian regime. It has introduced sanctions that are literally killing people and destroying the economy. The US and its ally Israel have assassinated various members of Iran's government. It's essentially a one-sided war that Iran is too scared to participate in because of what they know will happen if they do. Now, Iran's government is awful. Women are second-class citizens. They kill gay people, and most non-Muslims experience a lot of discrimination. I think we'd all like it to be gone. But as the Iranians suffer assassinations and sanctions, they know that they are under attack, and the government uses that to say you need us to protect you from the Americans. And in a way, they are kind of right. If America did the same thing to Iran as they did to Iraq, I think we'd all be missing the supreme leader. The alternative is revolution. But plenty of Iranians are too scared to revolt because if their state collapses, America will win. Those who are brutally suppressed, and the government can just blame their excessive force on the desperate times, because they are pretty desperate. If America wasn't threatening them with Iraq's fate, or literally hurting them with sanctions, the people would be a lot more prepared to overthrow their government and put a democracy in place. One that wouldn't make nukes or hang people for being gay. By applying this pressure to Iran, we are moving them in one of three ways: war, invasion, and collapse. Dead Americans, the rise of terrorist groups, and absolute heck for the Iranian people. Further consolidation of power, further repression of their people, and possibly even the development of nuclear weapons so they can have something to bargain with. People become so desperate that they rise up anyway, out of pure anger, fear, and desperation than any plan, and we end up with a civil war, like Syria, or some new dictatorship, like Egypt. We support Saudi Arabia, an equally repressive, if not more repressive, state, and we shouldn't support either of them militarily, but it shouldn't be too hard to at least respect their sovereignty and simply tell them what we think about them, like normal countries do. There's no way we can make it better. The Iranian people have to be the ones to do it, and many of them are trying right now. But America doesn't want an independent, free Iran. They want a subservient Iran. You are naive for posting a one-word comment like that and thinking that people will agree with you. China is such a massive industrial nation that pretty much no one can afford to put sanctions on them. That's the issue with the system. China produces everything the cheapest, so they basically get to do what they want. Also worth mentioning that the primary people in the camps are Muslims, and Western nations tend not to care too much about Muslims since the advent of Islamic extremism. So there's that too. Muslims don't give a crap either. Their governments have ratted out Uyghurs. Turkey exchanged them for vaccines, and nobody has spoken out about it. Uyghurs are pretty much on their own here, unfortunately. Because IDK what to do about it. I can spread awareness just like you, but ultimately what am I supposed to do? That's a serious question, like IDK how to help. The world didn't care what the Nazis did to their Jews. It's only when the Nazis started invading other countries and doing it to their people did people sit up and pay attention. Some people do care, but the economic leaders not so much. Nazi Germany was an opportunity. They had nothing to lose than some material and a few men. It was also a great way to gain political and economic power in and around Europe. China, however, is a major part in global economics. From the technology branch to the film industry, every major company relies to China in some way. If the nations would intervene no, chances are that they don't get their part of the cake anymore, and that's something no nation wants to miss. What can we do? The only people with the power to do anything about it are the people who have a vested interest in not doing anything about it. The people in power are busy committing their own human rights abuses. Are you aware that the USA, Canada and Australia did exactly the same thing to natives, educating them, breeding them with whites, killing them, parking them in camps, etc. Did anybody at the time shed a tear? Nope. Are natives still prejudiced in those countries? Yep. Africa, Asia and European countries, the same. It's a shame, but it's far away and people already have to deal with their own struggles before taking care of what's happening to someone on the other side of the planet. Someone you don't relate to. Then consumerism and capitalism make people turn their heads. People do. Mention China anywhere on this website and see if you don't get a reply about the Uyghurs. Plus a bunch of world leaders have expressed concern about it, but have failed to sanction because China is scary. It's poor taste to farm karma off this atrocity. Germany was a small, but relatively advanced country who conquered a few of its sparsely populated neighbors before they fell apart from within, and the US and Russia picked them apart. China is a massive mountainous country with 1.4 billion people, one of the world's largest militaries, and literally dozens of first world nations depend on them economically. It doesn't matter if what China does is worse. The idea of a military invasion of China is laughable. But also let's not pretend anybody invaded Germany to stop the Holocaust. If Germany hadn't invaded its neighbors, it would have been allowed to carry out its genocide. This is what happens when one country holds the balls of the world in their hands. Human life is not as valued as it is portrayed. In fact, it is one of the most expendable resources out there now. Israel does literally the same thing, and Saudi Arabia does much worse things. Do you think the US will stop selling weapons to these countries? Maybe stop your own government from doing evil things before you try to fix other countries. Shut up, we sell them weapon in the name of freedom. Well put. 1. The minorities are Muslim. Generally the superpowers don't give a frick about them. 2. It is China. Even USA are scared of them. 3. It's 2021. China is #1 now. They own everything. These are the answers for your question. When USA was the main superpower back in the days, you guys take everything from any shithole country you want, mainly oil. Now, China is making the same thing, but times 100. This is the best answer. Why has no one cared about all the other genocides in Africa and the Middle East? There's at least awareness of what's happening to the Uyghurs today. Most people were entirely unaware of the atrocities committed in Rwanda until Hollywood started making movies about it. Sure, there's the fact that we're economically dependent on China, but we aren't economically dependent on the Darfuri Sudanese, and no one is stopping that either, and that's been going on for 20 years. This isn't an argument to say that we shouldn't intervene. This is just an attempt to educate on the perpetual apathy towards human suffering. Through history as well as now, people will only care when things affect them. Almost every big company depends on China for cheap labor, and, let's be fair, it's the big companies who rule the world, not governments. Hi, before you start reading and voting on stuff, have you stood up in the last hour? Have you eaten or had any water recently? Don't forget to take a break every once in a while. Crap's bleak right now, but there's a lot of good we can do with some intention and will. Friendly reminder to take care of yourself. Due to the amount of vitriolic, racist, abusive comments and reports coming in on this post, we're locking it. Thank you to all who participated in earnest. Because they make stuff cheaply. Until we cut off imports from countries that do these things, we'll always be assisting them with their atrocities. Because it's not happening. The majority of the claims that it is happening can be traced to a few US funded outlets, or Adrian Zenz, a legit neo-Nazi who claims he's on a mission from God to destroy China. There's also the fact that no Muslim countries claim any misdeeds, only NATO countries and their periphery. Yet, all this balls comes from the Zenz report, interviewed Atoas who have constantly contradicted themselves, and literal terrorist groups, as well as the Falun loonies. Can PPL stop saying nobody cares? We do. The average person who follows the news knows about this. Every major news outlet has reported on this. Every day this is in the headlines and people still say, why is no one talking about this? China isn't just a country, it's a global corporation. China has money in everything from goods to politics. In pretty much every country. If China fell tomorrow or decided it wouldn't do business with other countries again, then the world would be fricked economically for quite a while. They don't hold themselves to the rest of the world's pollution measures either because it would lose too much money. It's cheaper to just pay the massive fines every year than to stop polluting. They're one of the main reasons for our environmental decline. The UN can tell them to stop polluting, but they can't force them. The United Nations can come together to tell them to stop killing and torturing their people, but what can they actually do? China has the biggest military in the world and can start a world war and actually have a good chance of winning it if they really wanted to. I don't think there's a risk of that though, because it's much easier and more profitable to manipulate economies and politicians without the actual risk. A war and people can be lost, but you can always make more money tomorrow. If, and this is a big if, but if there was ever evidence that China created the coronavirus and accidentally let it loose, it wouldn't matter. They are literally too powerful and too rich to hold accountable. You can compare China to the current state of the US Republican Party. You can accuse them and show evidence, but when the cards are stacked in their favor, there's not much you can do. You can break laws day in and day out because there's no one stronger to enforce them on you, and every other world government knows it. I think your post explains itself. You cite concentration camps and link them to Nazis. You don't include the American ones. the Russian ones, or the many others that have existed before and since the German Polish ones in the World War II era. Because the Holocaust PR tour has linked concentration camps with death camps, the public senses aren't rolled up over concentration camps without seeing the same published atrocities that were shown after Auschwitz, real and otherwise. Looking at you, flesh lamp. This has caused a desensitization to the concept, ironically, sadly in my opinion. We're not seeing emaciated humans, smokestacks belching, and the other disgusting things that may prompt us to care enough. Orderly rows of prisons fit into the Joker axiom that as long as things go along in an orderly fashion, people will accept it regardless of the horror involved. Milgram's experiment suggested the same idea immediately after the horrors of Auschwitz were brought to daylight. Time marching on numbs the senses. You posted the same question multiple times in different subreddits within the last couple of hours, so obviously you're not too afraid to ask. What makes you think any of what you're reading or learning about is real? What are the sources you base your opinion from? China's not the world's enemy. Interesting how they all made it to the front page with thousands of upvotes too. China is too important to the global capitalist machine. Same reason the US attacked Afghanistan and Iraq when Saudi Arabia is who attacked the US on 9/11. On your point about Nazi Germany, the Allies essentially knew what was going on and there was general public sympathy, in Britain at least, towards Hitler. World War II started not because of ideological beliefs that Hitler should, not commit mass genocide, but rather because Hitler was threatening the whole of Europe. Similarly, unless there is a huge push for drastic actions against China, it's likely that nothing will be done. Because concentration camps don't exist in China, this is Western propaganda, which exist only to lower your opinion about China. Nazis didn't do the exact same thing as China is doing in this case. They are both disgusting things, but not literally the same. What China is doing is already appalling. No need to compare them directly to Nazi extermination camps. This is Reddit. China is literally Nazi Germany. But when the US kills millions of Muslims, it's just collateral damage from spreading freedom. Probably the same reason that nobody minds us having the most prisoners in the world. Maybe bar China, we torture them too and loads are innocent. We're kidnapping thousands of children and forced hysterectomies on immigrants. Yes, it's absolutely racially targeted. And we're going to have a world war before a Bastille Day? Stop freaking trying to get in everyone else's crap while we're collapsing. Can we please fix our freaking fascism here first instead of worrying about the other superpowers doing it? We covered up coronavirus and refused to address it. Don't fall for this blatant misdirection. Yeah, a lot of people seem to think slavery is abolished in the US. But there is an exemption for prisoners in the Constitution, and prisoners are disproportionately black, as they get disproportionate sentences and targeted policing. First of all, people care, and second of all, people know what is happening. However, China has nuclear weapons, a massive belligerent army, and most nations have monetary interests with China. It is simply not possible to turn off a light switch and end business with China. It will be a slow process. It is literally easier to turn a blind eye and continue business as usual. The most nations can do is point it out, sanction China, but then they will sanction you back and it will hurt them the most. Just look at Australia. To stop what is happening in China, it would take a little war. Again, China has nuclear weapons, a belligerent army, allies like North Korea and Russia. It is easier to turn a blind eye than to go to war, get nuked, have your country's economy collapse, your cities bombed, soldiers and civilians burned alive via bombings. Change should come within, not from outside. Imagine the scenario where China and Russia disagree with the US, for sterilizing immigrants and putting children in cages, and they use that as an excuse to invade and take over the country. You can't be the world's police. Again, change has to start from within, but it is difficult in a place like China, and change often gets stopped short, as we can see from the Russian arrests. The way to solve this, in my opinion, is for major first world nations to gather proof, images, audio and video recordings, bring it up to the public and form a coalition of nations to sanction China. Impossible to do as all nations rely on China's slave labor and cheap goods. But then the argument of other nations spying on China becomes a thing, and China would get mad and declare war on one country, name anyone, and others would be unlikely to step forward and risk getting nuked to heck and back. The only way I see change happening is if China declared war on a neighboring nation that is allied to the West. I'm thinking Taiwan here, and even then, it is unlikely anyone would step in because again, nobody wants to be nuked. Look at what happened to Hong Kong. Nobody stepped in. By nobody I mean England. China would have to invade a Western country and full-out war would need to break out for the West to step in and invade China, and then, you know the rest. The truth is that it's not so simple. Times change, war changes. Before, countries would go to war over salt, anything. Today, we have nukes, drones, ICBMs. The risk of going to war is too much. Plus the political flack of soldiers dying on foreign soil for foreigners the locals, Westerners, don't care about. To end my rant, let me just say it's freaking complicated. Pol Pot killed 1.7 million Cambodians, died under house arrest, well done there. Stalin killed many millions, died in his bed, aged 72, well done indeed. And the reason we let them get away with it is they killed their own people, and we're sort of fine with that. Hitler killed people next door. A quote from Eddie Izzard. So until you see China invading neighboring countries and ethnically cleansing the people living there, don't expect much to happen. Look up mother and baby homes in Ireland. Last one closed in the 90s. Has Ireland learnt from this? Nope. Look up direct provision centers. The world is cruel and awful. As much as no one cares about children separated from moms in the USA or all the other human rights infringements made by the US, states are never good. People care, but we can't do much. If we have a war with China, the monumentous amount of goods they create for countries around the world stops and the prospect of instant nuclear war is instantly an issue. Honestly, I'm amazed ISIS and other extremists aren't going and trying to do something. It would be more likely that we would fund other groups like that, with armaments and training, rather than get directly involved. Everyone cares. We just also know that the only way to make them stop is through massive sanctions by the major economic markets communities, EU, US mainly, but for it to have real and immediate effect, you'd also need South America and Mexico, India, Africa and Russia to play along. And there's not one goddamn single chance that even one of those communities, let alone all of them, are going to decline the profit that comes from cooperating with China, because companies, billionaires and corrupt leaders have an outsized say in these things. The only other course of action is military intervention against a nuclear power with arguably the largest readily available army in the world. As a socialist, I implore you to look at this as an inevitable course of capitalism's putting profit ahead of people. But then again, there's no denying PRC started out with the intent of becoming socialist. So what the heck do I know? I think the big difference between the situation with Germany in World War II and China now is that Germany was attacking and annexing other countries. China is doing all this within their borders, so there is less political will to step in. I feel like one of the issues is everyone thinking they can't do anything about it makes it a self-fulfilling prophecy, because politicians would definitely act if they saw it as a popular move. Where did you get this idea that no one is concerned about the status of the Uyghurs in China? There's increased awareness given to that. Definitely there's room for more awareness yo. I'd say there's lots of things to care about in the world. Nobody is capable of caring about everything equally. I could also ask, why don't you care as much about sex trafficking or female genital mutilation as you do about China? And what does caring do when you can't actually do a thing about it? People talk about but don't really care much for it, mainly because in the West, Chinese are considered a minority, hence why they struggle to talk about these stuff. You mentioned the coronavirus and that's a great example of what I mean. Despite them hiding it, jailing doctors and people who spoke out, people ignored that and raised heck when it was referred to as the Chinese virus, because it was deemed offensive. Yet that same people remained quiet when the mutation was referred to as British variant. Same with the Spanish flu. Another reason is because it's not happening to us. So why bother? You don't see feminists rallying for what happens to women in countries like Iran or Pakistan or several other dozens. Yet when they can't free the titty in New York streets they rally for that. Or how BLM remains silent to all the atrocities Africans go through in their country. Just look at Nigeria now. Or how white nationalists complain about white genocide and white people being ignored. Yet they don't give two shoots about the hundreds of white families struggling with the opioid crisis. Or how Muslims cry when someone is Islamophobic towards them, but remain quiet when someone touting their religion beheads someone. Activists, or just people that strongly identify with a certain group, speak out about what directly affects them. It's not about what's morally right, but what will make my life better. Your life? I don't care. Even Muslim countries don't give a crap about the UIs. Hope I spelled it right. Their own governments are ratting them out, and the rest of the population remains silent. Looking at history, the world tends to turn a blind eye to these types of actions as long as the infracting county keeps it within their own borders. Expanding these horrible actions outside their own borders is when the wars and world wars occur. Everyone cares. Literally the entire world is condemning China for these specific human rights abuses. I completely agree with your outrage on the subject. I completely disagree that no one seems to care. This is the very opposite of day. Both the current US administrations and the previous administration's State Department, albeit during the lame duck period, have both condemned China's involvement in the Uyghur concentration camps. Since the United States federal government, alongside numerous other major nations, have condemned it and are working on sanctions, your claim that nobody seems to care falls flat on its face. What you should be arguing is the world isn't doing enough about it. I hear people talk about it and see it on Reddit every single day. A school I worked at last year had a whole display case full of info on it and it's been on the news tons. IDK where people keep getting the idea that nobody cares. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.